Okay, so our next poet here tonight is Anne Boyer, and she will be introduced by Sue Landers. Here's Sue.
When asked why she writes poetry, Anne says, "I write because there are important things to be said. Things which have never been said before, things which have been said before but need repeating, things which have been said before but need some small correction, and very old lies which I can't stand as truth." I'm grateful for the work of Anne Boyer, for the work that includes a book of dreams, a book of questions, a book of impossible instructions, a tumbler of money sick as fuck, and a tumbler of poets without clothes. I'm grateful for her work that wakes up like everyone else in innocence and vision, her work that is awake in a place where women die, her work that wreaks havoc on our cortical folds, her work that wants to know everything, her work that wants everyone she knows and loves to know everything, her work waging war for tenderness, her work that is the slippery other of the law, her work that is practiced in breaking, her work that is rich with the abolition of wage labor, her work where the poets feast at the longest table, her work that twerks on the lip of a live volcano, her work that wears enormity, not a uniform, her work that loves a teeming crowd, her work that is a hoodlum in a world of hoodlums, her work that sounds nothing like giggling, her work that wanders frenzied through the city, her work that all of a sudden is a city on fire, her work that is bullet printed on the walls of a city that has armed its teenaged girls, her work that brings us here together tonight, for which we are all so very grateful. Anne Boyer.
Thank you, Sue, and thank you everyone for coming. It's really great to be here. Fable. The city was Virginia City, was a virgin city, and in this, the virgin city, the men were a force like a mob. In the virgin city, the movements were of men about to commerce or the commencement of a mob. Outside the virgin city, the Cartwrights existed with men of many colors. I mean, they ruled the men of many colors, and so the Ponderosa was a gentleman's anarchy or a feudal deal, though when they came to the virgin city, everyone was getting in the Cartwrights' grills. The women were always guest stars. They were easily enough handled. If they were thought to have had sex or to have been whorish or to have been manipulative of men who wanted to have sex with them, they were choked or shot by thugs or their fathers. They were held by their arms. Their eyes were looked into by Adam. They were never able to testify. They were distraught. They were guest stars. You never saw them twice. Finally, a woman came to me. She brought the police. I said from the closet, "Did the artist kill him?" The artist never did. That one time with Clarissa proved they couldn't have a woman on the Ponderosa. I'd watched the guns of the young artists who had come to shoot their guns. They would shoot their guns and then explain, "This is where I shot and why." They explained how and why they would learn to not be free. A drunk man came to me. He held his bottle as a young artist would hold a gun. I was just trying to appreciate the artwork. He was just trying to rape me against the car. I had no gun. I yelled, "You are strange, you smell strange," ran away to the closet of a church in Nebraska where I read a work of literature in imitation of my own. Finally, a woman came to me. She brought the police. I said from inside the closet, "Did the artist shoot the rapist with their guns?" I said from inside the closet, "Did the artist shoot the rapist with their guns?" The police were there, but not to hear me speak. The police were a reluctant comedy routine. They had shown up naked but for black socks and badges and an accompanying cartoon, which they handed to me through the cracked open door. The police performed from a work called I Worry Often About Being Homeless, or Damnatio de Memoria, a 17-part treatise on the self-suppression of undeserved esprit de corps. It is at this moment I formed the Society for the Destruction of Unwritten Literature. I was no rustic man, but too clumsy even in the eyes of the unskilled. I was not a field hand, but still ill at ease among the educated classes. I'd been known to have read a certain number of books concerning rare affects and common cities, but I was not interesting by blood. I knew the songs of every bird, but I'll admit I knew nothing of the gallantries of justice, of beauty, of guns, of rational love. Earlier this summer, a friend of mine said that a real poet only writes 10 pages of poetry a year. And I said that's fine for him. But I said for people who historically have been excluded from the creation of literature, we should write 10 poems a second. Like when we blink, it should be in Morse code, right? All poems, and when we sweat, it'll fall into alphabets for languages not yet invented, right? And so then, to disagree with him even more, I told him I'm gonna write 100 poems in a day, 100 lyric poems in a day, no appropriation, just 100 poems in a day. And I did. The day was the longest day of my life. It lasted 20. And I read all 100 in Oakland on the eve of my 40th birthday this summer. I am not going to read all 100 to you tonight. I'll read some of them though. Well, kind of a lot. So, money, city, sick as fuck. How is it we ball who never once hustled? Riot porn of Pompeii. To never feel lonely, only counter-revolutionary, in the illuminated RSS feed of Remus, while Romulus sells the people cameras to turn on themselves. Raise high the wireless amphitheater as the last sunlight falls on the shoulders of the first larval gorillas. You are systematic these days, but this does not mean you are monumental. Sit here, I'll tell a story about hard drives emptied till they are filled with fire. This poem where the title came from is actually from my last trip to New York, where I found myself at this Paris Review party with this chandelier, right? And I didn't know what I was doing there, right? So the end of the ever after parties. How do you dance at a party where you want to kill everyone? Danny says, with blades on. Money, city, sick as fuck. Jasper is a difficult pillow. To be much better than sitting like a glowering proletarian creature. Me, Bed-Stuy sex over Gowanus sex, Missoula sex over Tallahassee. Why are your clothes still on? As if the answer isn't self-protection. Nullify forever how that fails. Tomorrow, I'll be a citizen. But tonight, I'll go hard. Till midnight, The Principle of Evil is my favorite episode of all time. We're rotting with eagerness and admitting publicly all that rhymes with death is animal and singing. A number of years ago, you came to town and downloaded Marching Forward to an insurrection nested in preventative glamour. But I am so full, how can I handle a contest between funeral and jail? I don't know how once you get started, you are ever supposed to stop this intimate heckling. I did not consent to an aerial view of history. What happens in photos like this is love-hate growing proportionately for 3 seconds at 6:57 a.m. Yes, I'm in love with the riot porn star, the barbarian radical agent of accuracy. The circumstances wouldn't have felt so clever outside the liminal hours of every month of my life. As it happens, the state has no monopoly on violence, just a silent partnership with the family. The business of literature, a cult of failure, sharing hairdryers in a luxury hotel. I hate the police again and hope you are responsive to this uncensored version of my deepest affections. My syntax is prettier when I am a creature of appetite in the costume of a creature of the counter-disciplinary society, but I'm not sure your freedom is a winning career. As official descriptor, plutonic ideal, ritual morning receipts of ephemeral agonies. I just thought of you, but was not sweetly acquiescent to being a filter which mortality strains through. Distracted by inscriptions on women's graves as counter-literature, I seriously considered sending a picture just to let you know we are corpses for starters. Sharon's obol, bitcoins in the mouth. Instead of poems, build model supply chains in the atrium of modern art. In uber-nostalgic anticipation of our emancipatory circulation, double character of guerrilla training camp in the office of a poet laureate. And what is communist stoicism? At what administrative breakfast do we recuperate fantasies of Eros and Thanatos holding hands? After the revolution, to be kittens in the same litter. But what previously lonely slaveries the millennia formed to libido, when the master breaks our legs, it is impersonal to want to kiss the reenacted chance procedure of the multiply inflamed. Me, IRL. That flame felt eternal, so I burned eternity. This was not minor to make a bonfire of the lion's share. Consulting the ancient literature, I did not care if the lyric grew into an incident. I didn't care about a mimeograph of my loins GPS. Distributed among the robots was a gratuitous classical direction, a love poem for this particular problem. My hands looked like innocents holding a kill list. What I shouldn't carry, the abyss. Hell life in the vernacular, because smoke over the high church is blood. You could build a cute city, but this is no point in history to fig leaf shit up. Sponsor a hero's parade of every bank swaddled in plastique, biohack 1,000 lives fit for self-immolation. First, we kill the art historians. And the only thing grosser than amusement parks. And by this, I mean we clear the space for the body's figure of speech. Hey, I totally get it. Chevrolets in every idiom. Bonfire of the vanity publishing projects of the left, my regular Tuesday night suspicion of an erotic formation in which the infrastructure is at war without itself. To exchange my tremendous abilities for one lover with full agency who is DTF, the marvels of the century, day to day, 100% more oracle in bed. I'm trying to be as ancient as possible, to hallucinate the labor camp of a natural state called lyric, while getting laid in a sickbed vision in the service of sociology. You all look like cops. And everyone is a formal practice of informatic optimism, as if a collection of exposures is the difference between radiance and the service sector. Please just let me be a limber accompaniment to privacy settings, aspiring to the corrective function of who is smashing the state of historicized and particular weeping. No one buys poems, but so many ways to buy poets. No plural possessive means women's. This is calculated for the maximum delight of being paid less and giving up in exhaustion. And then they said they wouldn't, the devilish presentation of then we don't exist, and the devilish fading starlit-looking evaporation of my tears. No political matter, the best argument is the beauty I'd seized if I hadn't been training to be dead-eyed for a reason. But fuck it, I love holding guns. With a substantial library called Total Refusal of Gradients and Mimesis. I'm bored by your poetry, and the news will tell us nothing over and over again. The pornography of particularization to view each search term as best revolution ever. Love poem as communique, as selfie, as to-do list. I'll hurl from total war. sick as fuck, and thought I couldn't get any sicker. Then I fell in love. The provenance of my erotic new radiance forged from the same shit, different century. Virile and decorative antagonist regarding autonomy. I don't believe in romance, just property management abyss. For John Wieners. Viva the poets who like to be penetrated. Doesn't matter by what or by whom. Heavy mammalian playlist, totalizing troll of needy glances up or down. Everything's an elegy with what is not us inside of us. Viva who opens, viva a bottom's heaven, viva imperfect hell. Everything in the world. Banish love, banish sex, banish sublimation, banish banishment. Little heart, come back, and stuttering firsthand, and tell me your poems. For I'm too ugly to talk in any but your ancient dialect, and need 100 dithyrambs to soften this. Aeolian Heart-On. Dear infectious and generalized desire of my 89th of 100 insurrectionist love poems. Sparrows have no numerical ambitions, and no tree resolves to overleaf in green despair. But in my vision, I was never better than anything else who thinks she knows what she's doing. Mixing a mild explosive called the last days of her own dynamism or the first days of the historicity of dream life with the perfect contents of an innocent costume as a black widow Ed Dorn. Anti-life of the party, the ruthless I don't give a fuck of the omnivorous gunslinger in the empire of common ends. The last cave painting left. Even the light has to issue a manifesto on this highly allegorical selfie. Raggedy-looking carnality, dulcitory greatest works whose cause is category colluding with dying and wanting its stuff. The pain you feel is actually just liberation, eating breakfast and killing the landlord. The women decided to have children so freedom could keep them up all night. But to look at faces is the closest I get to preaching. I sing of Brinks trucks slowed in honey and the island paradise of missile silos, the catastrophic banality of when mortal toil could fake as reminiscence. I sing of Brinks trucks robbed by nurslings and the metro area of a human hand. To never be fancy, but every limb skilled at tenderness and militant anti-abstraction. Let's make the opposite of literature. Can we sit together in blood and muscle? Must we wait for the celestial grass to grow? Let's strike our glasses now with total abandon of metonym, because I'm into it when we cut each other to swear our oaths instead of poems. Resolved to be decadent, as any other cryptic Jeremiah, thankful for the vestiges of a million occasional poems of the mornings when the sky and the apartment complex meet up. I used to spend all night crying over death, which led to sex, which led to more crying, which led to dying, which led to the young man saying, the life of a poet and everything and everyone is a free and open spirit and sex, which is a roundabout way to name a theory of antagonism of a certain standard of winning. How you are never alone is a type of love, I guess. In the ruins of gamification, we drew magical circles in which to conjure preservative instruction manuals. A secret notebook of the subtweeted dialects of an electric city where the blues were always encoded and never sung. The long night of a sorceress in the de-alphabetized universal history, these instruments delivered speeches blinding as Elrads. We could sense our destiny as a dog could sense a wolf's encryption. This soliloquy of a grindcore morning is, it's better to have friends than history. A ton of thought to cannibalize the model of a scavenged new frequency of government which devours only the tagline dialectical. We are a lot happier than circumstance would suggest, and what food source a whole life lived in labor conditions. And sorry if I've been an animal during the assembly of the expressive classes, but the hero we need is the largest gang ever, a ballad we would sing if we were born in a different time. All your money is counterfeit money. Vicious, ugly, and intractable. Rich, 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 fucker, weeping there is my baseline responsibility. Sometimes I think, if you can't have life, you don't even try it. North Face rationality when a hoodie isn't enough. A glaring patch of swerve, like insurrectionary poetry. The credentialed fine wine is burning. The civic daydream of backhoe who might target party headquarters, blackberry quail, future sky, and cop gaze. Melancholic interpretation of a teenage dream. Naked with a black flag, self-immolation as mook. There are hardly any prisons anymore. And in all our dreams, we can get pregnant by no man in particular. The object of augury is an endless amount of affectionate persons. They crawl out of holes and never mistake the purpose of struggle for anything but care. Can you imagine rating your poems this way? In a confederacy of exception, bald diminishment finish line swearing oath against the specifics of oblivion, called earnest things clumsily stated, called wages for tenderness and nothing else. I prefer to end whimpering or taking out the trash. But what I can't handle is leaving this nervous system of sentiment. Let's wish everything this morning, all books condensed into a cover-up of the Declaration. Nothing. Oh, hide. The fissure between being born and the terminal, to think fondly of when we were Old Testament, when the avant-garde cleared out. When the avant-garde cleared out, I was allowed the blunt force of full-figured virtue laid out on the bed. I'm surprised when we don't happen every minute of history. I could end with the futureless bounty, could promise the incident called ours. The greatest obstacle to vision is nothing. I have always been the future's intimate, and my oeuvre is loitering over there like a teenager, begging to be loved. And no maudlin extraction like the cannon, but at the blockade, its privacy bleeding out to a perfect choir. The peak consequence, this port of pleasure, we will or will not realize. And the last one from that work. I aim no lower than the roof above the stars. Writing out the calculations of Prometheus. He's evading some gods, but I'm having a special moment with a grave digger, subpoena in hand, for billions of pages worth of charismatic genius. We need an entire scene built from reparations, a glamorous bounce out of buried opportunity, an other folder, existential and public, translating the violable body to its meso-astral iterations. I don't worry about what is forgettable, because that is nothing, I predict. What resembles the grave, but isn't. Always falling into a hole, then saying, okay, this is not your grave, get out of this hole. Getting out of the hole, which is not the grave, falling into a hole again, saying, okay, this is not your grave, get out of this hole. Getting out of that hole, falling into another one, sometimes falling into a hole within a hole or many holes within holes, getting out of them one after the other, then falling again, saying, this is not your grave, get out of this hole. Sometimes being pushed, saying, you cannot push me into this hole, it is not my grave. And getting out defiantly, then falling into a hole again without any pushing. Sometimes falling into a set of holes whose structures are predictable, ideological, and long dug, often falling into this set of holes, into this set of structural and impersonal holes, sometimes falling into holes with other people saying, this is not our mass grave, get out of this hole. Altogether, getting out of the hole together, hands and legs and arms and human ladders of each other, to get out of the hole that is not the mass grave, but that will only be gotten out of together. Sometimes the willing falling into a hole, which is not the grave, because it's easier than not falling into a hole, really. But then once in it, realizing it is not the grave, getting out of the hole eventually, sometimes falling into a hole and languishing there for days, weeks, months, years, because, well, not the grave, very difficult still to climb out of, and you know after this hole, there's just another one and another one. Sometimes surveying the landscape of holes and wishing for a higher quality final hole. Sometimes thinking of who has fallen into holes which are not graves, but might be better if they were. Sometimes too ardently contemplating the final hole while trying to avoid the provisional ones. Sometimes dutifully falling and getting out with perfect fortitude, saying, look at the skill and spirit which I rise from that which resembles the grave, but isn't. So I wanted to write a sonnet that had everything in it and absolutely nothing in it. And so I did. Nightmare sonnet. Imagery, euphony, parataxis, hypotaxis, charm, transcription, assemblage, appropriation, virtuosity, sentiment, refrain, brutality, vision, confession, anger, the aleatory, the elegiac, the casual, the pornographic, the mimetic, the figure of speech. Instruction, preparation, abjection, the hallucinatory, the sprawling, the minuscule, the tercet, the canto, the ode, the email, the eager, the historic, the flattening, the unflattening, the heroic, riot porn, riot sext, riot subsext, authority, prizes. The volta, the arch, the vernacular, the mimic, the melancholy, documentarianism, lyricism, recuperations, personal brands, pop music, delight, transgression, undoing, innocence, evidence, coherency, care, strategy, theory, evasion, invention, wit. Desire, admission, scorn, iteration, declaration, adoration. Nature, violence, romance, mortality, landlords, work. The end. I wrote this yesterday. Every poem, until the revolution comes, is only a list of questions. So mourn for each poet who must purge from her verse, her verse. Thanks.
Thank you, Anne. Another amazing reading, and thank you again, Matthias. I realized I forgot at the beginning to announce upcoming readings. On Friday, Tracy McTeague and Kat Tice will be reading here, curated by Matt Longabuco. Monday is the open reading, and a week from tonight, Cornelius Eady and Bob Holman. And then on Monday, the 14th, Ted Dodson and Crystal Langwell. And of course, you can take one of these for free, and always consult our website at poetryproject.org. Have a good night.